The Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki is a compelling exploration of a deceptively simple idea, that under the right conditions, groups of people can make decisions, solve problems, and forecast outcomes better than even the smartest individual in the group. Through a blend of historical anecdotes, scientific studies, and real-world examples, Surowiecki builds a robust case for the power, and limits, of collective intelligence. The book is not a naive celebration of mob rule, but rather a nuanced study of how and when crowds get things right, and what causes them to go disastrously wrong. Surowiecki begins by drawing a line between crowd wisdom and herd behavior. Crowds are not automatically wise just because they are large. In fact, large groups can often be irrational, panicked, or blindly conformist. What distinguishes a wise crowd is not size but structure. For a group to make intelligent decisions, it must consist of diverse individuals, acting independently, with access to decentralized information, and with some system to aggregate their judgments. When these conditions are met, the result can be startlingly accurate, even more so than the most credentialed expert. One of the book's central illustrations is a classic experiment where a crowd at a country fair is asked to guess the weight of an ox. While no single person guesses correctly, the average of all guesses is astonishingly accurate. This becomes a powerful metaphor. Individuals may err, but their errors cancel each other out when aggregated properly. Surowiecki expands on this with examples from markets, sports betting, elections, and even submarine hunts, showing that collective judgment frequently outperforms specialists when the crowd is diverse and well-informed. The book explores 3 different types of problems that crowds can solve. Cognition problems, like estimating quantities or solving puzzles, coordination problems, like driving on the same side of the road, and cooperation problems, like agreeing on how much each person should pay in a shared expense. In each domain, the crowd's success depends not only on individual intelligence but on the quality of the system connecting them. It's not enough for people to think, they must be able to think independently and contribute meaningfully. Diversity emerges as a key pillar of crowd wisdom. Surowiecki argues that groups made up of people with different perspectives, backgrounds, and problem-solving styles tend to outperform more homogeneous expert panels. This is counterintuitive in a world that often privileges specialized knowledge. Yet, the book makes a compelling case that cognitive diversity introduces a range of approaches and error-correcting mechanisms that make the group's overall output more accurate and resilient. Another critical element is independence. When individuals are free to form their own opinions without being swayed by others, their collective input is more valuable. However, this independence is fragile. Surowiecki discusses the dangers of social influence, showing how conformity, peer pressure, or the desire to appear agreeable can undermine a group's effectiveness. Once people start watching each other too closely, they stop thinking clearly for themselves, and the crowd's collective intelligence evaporates. The concept of decentralization, where knowledge is spread out rather than concentrated, is also essential. Crowds draw their strength from the different pieces of information each member brings. When decision-making is centralized or when one voice dominates the conversation, the group's ability to self-correct and innovate is compromised. Surowiecki praises systems that allow local decision-making, such as marketplaces and open-source projects, for their ability to harness this decentralized power. Aggregation is the 4th condition, and perhaps the most mechanical. A system must exist to collect and synthesize individual judgments into a group decision. Without aggregation, diverse and independent input remains scattered and unusable. Sometimes the aggregation is simple, like averaging guesses, while in other contexts, such as Wikipedia or prediction markets, it becomes more sophisticated. The brilliance lies not just in individual inputs, but in how those inputs are brought together. Despite his overall optimism, Surowiecki doesn't shy away from discussing when crowds fail. He examines the Challenger disaster, market bubbles, and groupthink in politics as cautionary tales. These failures typically stem from violations of the core principles. Lack of independence, dominance by a few voices, suppression of dissent, or a homogeneous membership. The book insists that crowd wisdom is not automatic, it is an emergent property that must be carefully cultivated. A particularly engaging section of the book explores how markets, in theory, represent a form of crowd wisdom. Stock markets, betting exchanges, and futures markets aggregate beliefs about the future into prices. Often, these prices are remarkably accurate predictors. Yet, Surowiecki shows that markets can also go haywire, especially when speculation replaces grounded judgment, or when herd behavior and feedback loops distort signals. The book also delves into the implications for organizational decision-making. Surowiecki critiques traditional corporate hierarchies where decisions are funneled through top-down structures. He argues for flatter organizations that harness the knowledge and creativity of employees at every level. The companies that listen to a wide range of voices tend to make better decisions, adapt more quickly, and avoid the blind spots that can bring down more rigid competitors. Surowiecki draws on historical episodes such as the hunt for the USS Scorpion submarine and the development of Google's search algorithms to show how successful problem-solving often comes from the collective mind rather than a single genius. These stories underscore that it's not necessary to eliminate errors at the individual level. What matters is creating a system in which errors are not correlated and thus cancel out in the aggregate. The book's message resonates beyond business or markets. It applies to democracy, public policy, innovation, and even morality. In a time of polarization and digital echo chambers, the wisdom of crowds offers a hopeful but disciplined vision, that with the right conditions, groups of ordinary people can reach extraordinary insights. But this only happens when systems are designed to support diversity, independence, and open contribution. By the end of the book, Surowiecki positions crowd wisdom not as a replacement for expert opinion, but as a complement. He acknowledges that some decisions require specialized knowledge or centralized authority. But he also insists that for many of the most complex and dynamic problems we face, a well-structured group often knows more than any single person could. What makes the wisdom of crowds enduring is its fusion of rigorous reasoning and accessible storytelling. Surowiecki avoids jargon and brings his arguments to life with vivid examples, from the game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire to military strategy and traffic flow. He shows that wisdom is not about genius but about systems that allow knowledge to surface and be synthesized. Ultimately, the book is a celebration of human potential, not in the form of lone brilliance, but in the unpredictable, self-organizing intelligence of groups. It challenges our assumptions about expertise, authority, and leadership, and calls for a more democratic approach to thinking and decision-making. In a world where complexity is growing and trust in institutions is shrinking, Surowiecki offers a quietly radical idea, that, with the right structure, we are smarter together than we are alone.